Whoa, what is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Kind of been slow. I was going to do a mock draft about a week ago, but I said to myself, I'll wait till after the combine because right now, at least in my opinion, mock drafts are kind of irrelevant. They're kind of irrelevant anyway, but they're fun to do. But I figured at this point, I'll wait till after the combine when we see how these players perform. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more rumors that come out after that, and we'll start to really pick up our mock drafts then. I'll try to do 3 or 4 of them before the draft. In addition to that, I'm going to be live tomorrow. I wanted to go live over the weekend, just couldn't get around to it. But I want to talk more in depth about this topic kind of with you guys tomorrow, field some of your questions, and just have fun with you guys. Always love doing those live streams. In addition to that, talk to Bad Dog today. We're also going to be doing the Talking Giants show starting up next week. Not sure whose channel it's going to be on to start. I don't know whose turn it is, but we're going to start that show up as free agency is getting underway. There's going to be a lot of players to talk about. I do think, and we're going to talk about that in this video, that the New York Giants are going to be more aggressive in free agency than a lot of people expect. At least that's my opinion on the matter, and I'll talk about that more in depth throughout this video and even more in depth tomorrow during the live stream. But I'm not telling you they're going to go balls to the wall. I'm not telling you they're going to spend at the top of the market. I do think Joe Schoen will be selectively aggressive, but I expect the New York Giants to be more aggressive in free agency than they've been since Joe Schoen's taken over as the general manager for this New York Giants football team. And we'll dive into that throughout the course of this video. But we're going to start with Saquon Barkley. Shouldn't be a surprise to many people out there, but it's official. Not official. I guess things could change, but it came out today from a guy that obviously a lot of us trust in Adam Schefter. The Giants will speak with free agent to be running back Saquon Barkley and explore a deal with him, but they are also unlikely to tag him for $12.1 million. And that was in response to another tweet in which he said that the Raiders are unlikely to tag Josh Jacobs. And this is obviously the right move. And obviously, a lot of you guys that are watching this may not agree with that because I understand it. Saquon Barkley's a tremendous football player. But just based off of last year, if you weren't willing to commit what would have amounted to 2 tags and guaranteed money to Saquon Barkley, why would you tag him this year and commit $12 million against the cap? And I get a lot of people who argue, well, the cap went up, Chris. Yeah, that's all well and good. That's fair. But that doesn't mean that Joe Schoen's going to change his philosophy in terms of how he values positions and players. And last year, he told you he didn't value Saquon Barkley at $22 or $23 million guaranteed, which would have amounted to 2 tags. Well, I'm not surprised that he's not tagging him. It doesn't give you the ability to move money around. That doesn't mean that Saquon Barkley won't be back. There's rumors, however, that he's been talking to Houston. I saw that on Twitter, and we'll see how it plays out. I'm sure that Saquon's going to explore the market, but I still think there's a decent chance that he could be back with the New York Giants because here's why. The running back market, when you look at it, it is flooded with talent. None of these players are expected to be tagged, meaning they're all going to get to explore the market. Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Tony Pollard, and Austin Eckler. So that's a rich running back class, and last year proved, at least in terms of the running backs that were available, teams weren't willing to spend. Now, of course, the 3 most prominent running backs did not hit free agency, that being Pollard, Jacobs, and Barkley, all of whom are projected to hit free agency this year, but all of whom are a year older. Barkley, of course, coming off a year last year where he only averaged 3.9 yards per carry. I don't put that mainly on him. I think the offensive line was abysmal. As bad as the offensive line has been since he's been here, that was the worst crop of offensive linemen that he's had since he's been a New York Giant. Not to mention they were down to their 3rd-string quarterback, and the offense was incredibly predictable. I still think Barkley has a lot of gas left in the tank. He's not quite the same player he once was when he came into the league. He doesn't have that level of explosion, but he's still one of the better running backs in the league, and I expect him to be paid rather handsomely. I do think the Giants will probably give him an offer, and I do think he'll probably come back to the Giants in terms of at least give them an opportunity to match an offer that he may see elsewhere. But I do think Schoen will also draw his line in the sand. Where will that line be? I'm not too sure, but I'm not stunned that the Giants didn't tag him, being that you have to fully commit $12 million to your cap. What do I think is a area where Schoen would probably feel confident? Somewhere along the lines of 15 or 16 million guaranteed spaced out over 3 years, something like that. Whether it be 3 years, 30 million, 3 years, 33 million to make it look pretty, but you only give them 15 guaranteed with an easy out after 2 years. I could see something like that make sense where you could space out the money. You only have 3 or 4 committed to this year's cap. That could make sense to me, but I think a lot of it's going to depend on what Barkley's market is. But the fact that he's a year older, the fact that there's other competition at that running back position, and there's only going to be so many teams that are willing to spend at a premium dollar at that position, I think there's at least a chance that he could be back with the New York Giants. It'll depend where he is in the pecking order and how much these teams are willing to spend a player who's 27. But if I had to guess, I think it's more likely than not, if the Giants allow him to hit free agency, which it appears they will, someone will probably overspend. After all, he's still a really talented player. A team like the Houston Texans makes too much sense, right? They got a really good young quarterback in CJ Stroud. You add what you feel is a dynamic playmaker at the running back position with a young wide receiving core, and that could really take that offense to the next level. So could make a lot of sense there. Barkley to Houston seems like a good fit. I'm sure there's a lot of other scenarios that you could think of where he might end up, but I'm leaning he won't be back with the Giants, but it is far from a foregone conclusion. I could see the running back market cratering, and maybe the Giants do get Barkley back on a deal that they feel confident with, but we'll have to wait and see. Next up, we're going to talk about Daniel Jones, and you're going to see a lot of this throughout the process in the quarterback position in general for this team. Right now, if you asked me before we pull up with what Renan had to say, I think the top 3 picks are going to be quarterback. I think that's what most people think at this point in time. Whether or not the 3 picks picking in those spots take the quarterbacks that get taken in the top 3, that remains to be seen. There could certainly be some trades. The combine's going to have a lot to do with shifting. Maybe a guy like J.J. McCarthy blows people away. You don't know, right? Crazy things happen at the combine. But right now, the consensus top 3 are in no specific order: Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, and of course, Drake May. I think those will be the first 3 picks, and I personally think the teams that are picking there are going to take those quarterbacks. That's what I've said consistently. I still think that will be the case, but I've also said consistently that I think the New York Giants need to at least explore the opportunity. You don't know when you're going to be picking this early again. You have a quarterback in Daniel Jones who has not been able to stay on the field consistently, did not play well last year when you put more on his plate. You got to at least explore it if you really like one of these quarterbacks. And I'm sure that Joe Schoen and the New York Giants will. I'm still going to continue to say I don't expect them to take a quarterback in the first round of this year's draft, at least early on. Maybe they trade back up into the first because like I said, I think those 3 teams are going quarterback. The Bears, you could tell me all the rumors you want. You could speculate all you want about how they may keep Justin Fields, and maybe they will. Maybe I'll look like a fool, but I think they're taking Caleb Williams or whoever their number 1 quarterback is. Ryan Poles, after all, did not draft Justin Fields. Justin Fields is due to be a free agent after this year. If you were not to draft a quarterback there, you might as well just write the contract up now. Like if you're not drafting Caleb Williams and you passed up on CJ Stroud last year, you better be paying Justin Fields, right? That extension. So if you're going to pass on taking Caleb Williams, you're essentially committing $55 million a year to Justin Fields, who has shown promise. He's shown glimpses. But has he shown you that he is worthy of being a $55+ million quarterback in the NFL, which is the going rate if you're signing him to a franchise contract? And if you're not drafting Caleb Williams, what are you telling me? If you're not committing to Justin Fields as the franchise quarterback. And in the end, I don't think the Bears are going to do that. Poles didn't draft him. Fields hasn't shown it enough. I think the Bears are going quarterback. Washington, even if they were to trade down, which I don't think is going to happen, they're going quarterback, in my opinion. The only team that could make sense is New England. I've seen a lot of people talk about how the New England Patriots aren't equipped to support a quarterback right now. When does that stop the team from taking a quarterback? And I could certainly argue that the New York Giants are not equipped to bring in a quarterback right now, but 80% of the fan base would tell you that we need to draft a quarterback. And I'm sure about 80% of the New England fan base probably feels the same. We don't have a number 1 wide receiver on this roster. We had the worst offensive line in football last year, and we would have to trade up to get one. New England could stay there and take the quarterback. I still think New England's taking a quarterback with that selection unless they don't love, well, I guess, the third option that is there, whether that be Jaden Daniels or Drake May, more than likely would be the 2 candidates that could be there at number 3 overall. And maybe they would trade back. I guess that's a possibility, but I still think those 3 teams are going quarterback. But let's talk about what Jordan Renan had to say today on ESPN. I actually saw the video clip, but I just figured I'd pull up the quote. This coming from NFL Trade Rumors. Jordan Renan of ESPN, citing multiple sources, reported on SportsCenter Monday that if the situation presents itself correctly in the draft, the Giants would be seriously willing to look at the quarterback position in the draft. Renan adds that from speaking with people within the Giants organization, they believe not every quarterback would be a fit for the New York market. He specifically mentions the need for certain characteristics and certain personality, which shouldn't surprise you that the New York Giants value that at the quarterback position in this market. I do think it had at least somewhat to do with the reason why we drafted Daniel Jones in the first place, right? To handle the pressure of being a quarterback in New York. The Giants own the number 6 overall pick and have been floated as a potential team to trade up for a quarterback. Ron also mentions the possibility of New York packaging two second-round picks to move back up into the end of the first round to take a quarterback. And that, to me, is probably the more realistic scenario. But the question is, which quarterbacks are going to fall to that point? Will a McCarthy fall that far? Will a Penix fall that far? And do you feel comfortable, or do you even think it's worthy of trading up into the back end of the first to take a guy like a Michael Penix or take a guy, like a McCarthy if he were to fall, which I don't think he's going to. I've said countless times, I think he's going in the first half of the first round, and it seems like more and more people are getting on board with that. But that's at least a possibility. And I do think at some point in this draft, the Giants are going to take a quarterback. The question is where and when, and we'll have to wait and see. I don't think it'll be at 6 overall. I do think it'll be before the end of day 2, at least right now, if I had to guess. Now, things could change after free agency. If the Giants go out there and spend $10 million a year on a backup, well, I think that's more of an inclination that they probably will not spend one of their first 3 picks on a quarterback. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but it's less likely they would spend one of their first 3 picks on the quarterback if they spend $8, $9, $10 million on a backup, a guy that could compete with Daniel Jones and keep you in football games. And I wouldn't rule that out as a possibility because Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen are at least starting to be put on the hot seat, whether you like it or not. And I understand a lot of fans, and I actually agree with the overall mentality that this team probably shouldn't be thinking in the here and now, especially based off last year. They kind of should be building towards the future. But if you're Schoen and Daboll, you got to try to blend both. After all, this is year 3. This is not year 1. This is not year 2. You're coming off an incredibly disappointing year as a franchise. A lot of that having to do with injuries. We understand that. But I do think the Giants are going to be a lot more aggressive in free agency than some people may think. And I've talked about it countless times on my live streams. I think edge rusher is going to be a position that we prioritize. A lot of people have said that. Justin Pugh's come out and said that recently. It just makes sense. You want to get a guy on the opposite side of Kayvon Thibodeau to be able to open up that pass rush for the New York Giants, and it's a pretty rich free agent class at that position. We'll talk about that tomorrow when we go over all the pending free agents and guys that I could see the New York Giants attacking. But the name you hear time and time again is Bryce Huff. He's basically said in so many words that he'd like to remain in New York. Rumors have it that the Jets aren't going to be willing to pay him the money that he's going to command. The question is, are the New York Giants going to be willing to go up there and match that $20 million asking price that is rumored for a guy like Bryce Huff, who last year had, I think, one of, if not the best pass rush win rate in the NFL. He's one of the best pure pass rushers in the league. And if you were able to pair him opposite Kayvon Thibodeau, that could certainly help the defense. I also think we're going to look to grab a pretty strong offensive lineman. We'll talk about some of the guys tomorrow as well that I could see the New York Giants going after. But I think they definitely need a veteran presence on that offensive line. And in addition to that, I think they're going to need some help in the secondary. And I would like to think, especially with the raised cap, that the New York Giants are going to look to retain Xavier McKinney. But of course, a lot of that will come down to the market as well, as I talked about in my last video. Are the Giants willing to go to $18, $19 million a year? Because that may be what it takes to keep a safety in a raised cap. If you haven't heard, it went up to $255 million, which a lot of people didn't expect, to keep a 24-year-old safety with the upside of a guy like Xavier McKinney. I hope that the Giants get it done. Even though he's a safety, I understand it's not the most important position, but I do think he's an important player to this football team, and I do think he's a part of the future. So I hope they could get a deal done with him. I certainly can't see the tag getting done there either, being that it's $17.1 million against the cap. But listen, I think Daboll's job is on the line next year. I've said that a lot, and that's what I believe. We could say what we want. We could say that we think they need at least 4 years. When has that stopped matter in the past? And he's coming off a really bad year. If the team were to bomb next year, where does Daboll point the finger? Especially if you don't draft the quarterback at 6 overall. So knowing that, I do think the Giants are going to try to be a competitive football team in 2024 while still trying to maintain building properly towards the future. But I expect them to be pretty active in free agency. Last year, their only real impactful free agent outside of the guys that they retain, which of course the Giants were very active in that scenario, retaining Daniel Jones, retaining Andrew Thomas, or extending Andrew Thomas, extending Dexter Lawrence. But really the only super impactful free agent that the New York Giants brought in last year was Bobby Okereke. Of course, they also traded for Darren Waller, but I think we all agreed when they brought him in, he was more like a year or two stopgap because there wasn't really a number one weapon that was obtainable for the New York Giants due to the fact that it was a poor free agency crop at the wide receiver position and where we were picking in the draft. They probably didn't feel they were going to be able to get, a short-term fill-in number one option, and Darren Waller was the best option that they could get. So I thought that was their line of thinking there. But if you look at the pattern that Joe Schoen did last year at free agency, I would expect more of the same, but I expect them to be more aggressive. When I say the pattern, look at Bobby Okereke. A lot of people felt like when the Giants signed Bobby Okereke, they overpaid when they looked at the overall linebacker market. But what the Giants did was they identified a player that was still young, that they felt hadn't quite peaked yet. And really, they did the same thing with Daniel Jones. Obviously, it didn't work out for Daniel Jones, but they took the same strategy. They paid more of a premium for a guy that they felt like had untapped potential. In case of Bobby Okereke's situation, it seemed to have worked. Not so much with Daniel Jones, which was the more expensive proposition. But I think they're going to take a similar approach in this year's free agency. I've seen a lot of people point to Autry of the Titans, who obviously makes sense due to the fact that our defensive coordinator came from Tennessee, but he's older. He's 33, 34. I think Schoen is going to go more of the Huff route, that young player that maybe hasn't quite peaked yet, and you think he could grow into even more. And I think they're going to be willing to spend a little bit more, based off of the potential, based off of the what can he be with an improved coaching staff. That's what I think the strategy is going to be. I expect to see them spend a decent amount in free agency, but on young and up-and-coming players like a Huff, like several other players that we'll talk about tomorrow. But that's what I think Schoen's strategy is going to be, and I do think the Giants will be relatively aggressive in this year's free agency class. You can't build a team through free agency. I'm a big proponent that you have to build through the draft, but the Giants have a lot of holes on this team, and they're in a spot where they need to fill a lot of them if they intend to compete in what will be a challenging schedule next year. We'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. But I think the Giants are going to have a pretty exciting March leading into the draft going into April. And we'll see what holes they fill so we could better predict what the Giants may do in the draft. Hopefully I see a lot of you guys tomorrow. I'm looking forward to doing the live stream. Probably live around 6. I don't know. I work till about 5 o'clock. I'll probably go live for about 6, maybe to 8. We'll talk Giants football. We'll be live next week with Bad Dog. And free agency will be here before you know it. The Combine starts this week. Can't wait to talk Giants offseason with all you guys. As always, if you like what you watch, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.